This is day 2 of the G-20 summit in Pittsburgh. Finance ministers from the world's largest economies are all there discussing a number of global issues, not the least of which is climate change. This morning, Clean Skies' Susan McGinnis continues our live coverage from the summit in Pittsburgh. And Susan, the nations there represent more than 75% of the world's population.
They do. A very significant amount of the world's population, also 80% or more of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So it just gives you a little sense of exactly what is at stake here when it comes to climate change for these G20 talks over these 2 days. It has been a very busy agenda for the 20 ministers of these 19 countries and the EU, trying to discuss other issues as well, including bank regulatory reform and regulation of the nation's financial industries, global financial industries. A lot going on here related to climate change, though. There have been a lot of galas and parties. There have been lots of protests and some pretty serious crackdowns on protests, some of them having to do with climate change. Lots of events, press conferences and other events having to do with NGOs, different non-governmental organizations like the National Wildlife Federation, Center for American Progress, and some other groups that are here. Also, there was a working dinner last night where the heads of these G20 nations did come together to have some discussions. One thing that did come out of that was that these 20 people are set to agree on phasing out of fuel subsidies. This is for oil and coal and the more polluting fossil fuels. That's one of the things that I want to talk with Andrew Light about. He joins me now, Senior Fellow with the Center for American Progress. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Susan.
So tell me, how big a deal is this phasing out of the fuel subsidies? Is this a major accomplishment, major progress on climate change here?
It's a big deal because if you think about it, this is the first time that the U.S. has really entered into an agreement with other countries on climate change. We signed Kyoto, we never ratified it, we never tried to implement it in our own country, but now it looks like we're actually very, very close to a deal directly aimed at climate change with 20 other countries of the world.
And this is something that President Obama did already have in his 2010 budget in a different form. Is this a big win for him because his ability to make progress on climate change has started to come into question?
Right, and I think it's a big advance for him. It's actually would be a bigger commitment than he put in his original 2010 budget. Also, this goes back to last week. We really didn't know whether or not the administration wanted to put climate on the agenda, and then it looked like they were going to do it, and this is the centerpiece of their plan.
So this is the big day. I mean, a lot of working sessions happening today. What are you expecting tonight? Do you think that this fuel subsidy issue is going to be the big win over these 2 days, or are you expecting other large announcements to come out of this? We had Japan and China making some pretty bold statements about emissions targets reductions at the UN summit last week in New York. Will the U.S. step up on that end?
Well, I don't know if we're going to be talking about, what our midterm targets are going to be. Will probably be a reaffirmation of what our 2050 targets will be. Probably a reaffirmation of that whatever we're going to do, it has to abide by the science. You don't want to go above 2 degrees to pre-industrial levels, that sort of thing.
So they'll reiterate that again?
They'll reiterate that. They're going to talk about the fossil fuel subsidies. This could get us actually 10% below 1990 levels by 2050.
By mid-century.
If we do this. It's also going to raise a lot of revenue. I mean, you have to realize that over the last 6 years, the U.S. has subsidized fossil fuels alone to some degree of some $72 to $80 billion.
What about the resistance this is going to face? This is going to cause a huge backlash among these industries.
It will, and I think this will be the first true test, both of the administration against the industries and of these coalitions you've seen building, such as U.S. CAP, where you've got power generating utilities working with environmentalists to propose action on climate change. So it's going to test a lot of these alliances.
And that's an important issue, and another one that a lot of the NGOs we're talking to are talking about is this financial mechanism for the developing world to help them, support them in their efforts, either a fund or some kind of mechanism to help them with adaptation and mitigation. Will that be a part of tonight's press conference, do you think?
Well, what I hope, this is what I hope, the candidate Obama campaign on the pledge that when he was going to engage in a number of programs to try to raise revenue to combat climate change, that money would be sunk back into this array of programs we need to fight climate change. So what I'd like to see is a commitment that if they do decide to ease off on subsidies for fossil fuels, whatever revenue is gained there goes back into something like the adaptation fund to help these poorest of the poor countries to deal with the climate change they're already seeing.
Now, how big a win for Obama is this, the introduction of this Senate bill coming up next Wednesday?
I think it's a big win. I think especially in the midst of the continued worries about how we're going to get health care reform, the fact that they actually are going to drop the bill is good. And I think then as soon as we see movement on health care, then the administration will put the full force of its weight behind getting this bill through the Senate. And
how significant is this killing of Senator Murkowski's amendment yesterday?
Very critical there, because that could have been the first truly test vote. If the Murkowski amendment had really hit the floor and it had passed through, then I think the prospects of actually getting a Senate bill through before Copenhagen would have been very, very grim. So the fact that the Senate leadership rallied, the Democratic Party rallied and made sure sure that that amendment was killed. I think that was absolutely essential.
Okay, so with that, with the fuel subsidies and whatever we might hear today, are you getting the feeling that momentum is back on the increase now for optimism about something solid out of Copenhagen?
I think the momentum is getting back. This plus the speeches at the UN earlier this week, I think this shows that we actually are moving in the right direction.
And there still are a couple of rounds left. We've got Bangkok, Barcelona, and some bilateral negotiations. So what's your sense of optimism now?
I think that we're going to see confidence building measures. So when Obama goes to China, very, very critical meeting in November, I expect there that we're going to see announcements of more than just sort of memorandums of understanding, happy talk about how we're going to cooperate, actual putting sort of plans on the table, on paper with numbers, particular projects, cooperating on, say, for example, CCS or energy efficiency, something really concrete so that by the time we get to Copenhagen, then people will be ready to make a deal.
All right, a lot of people are hoping you're right. Andrew Light from the Center for American Progress Action Fund, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good luck today. So, Tyler, lots of plenaries, working sessions today. This is the big day, day 2 of the G20 summit. We're going to be following this all day long. We'll have another live report at 4 p.m. And again, the president is speaking shortly after that at about 4:30, 4:40. So we're watching for any announcements. Of course, we're expecting the fuel subsidy, details about that, that agreement that is set to be made. We'll find out more about that and whatever the president says after that on other issues. We will have all of those results here. Lots of wrangling here will be going on throughout the day, Tyler, as I know is going to be happening there in D.C. with that Senate bill coming out next Wednesday.
Susan, another step on the road to Copenhagen.